My name is Rob Lansfield. I'm a former MCN president, and my day job is at Wesleyan University. I'll be chairing today, but that mostly will consist of staying out of the way and letting these folks tell you what they have to tell you. First up is Katie Velasco from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and her presentation title is right up there on the screen. So Katie, go.
Thank you, Rob. So my name is Katie Velasco. I'm from Smithsonian. I work at the Natural History Museum, and I am going to talk to you guys about design and developing your own iTunes use site for your museum, and also some of the constraints of Apple's design and our lessons learned. And so this is really a nuts and bolts conversation, so I hope it doesn't get too technical. For starters, how many of you are familiar with iTunes? How many of you are familiar with iTunes U? Okay, well, a little bit of background. iTunes started in 2001. iTunes U didn't come about until 2007. And iTunes is a piece of software you download to your computer, and it's a media player. It plays digital media, and it allows you to download and share. And iTunes U is that educational branch of iTunes. So iTunes U really started aimed at college and university level students, and then since then it's branched out, and it really now offers content to grade schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. And iTunes U really offers beyond campus institutions, like museums, a really tremendous opportunity to stand out against universities by offering collections-based media. And this is in the form of audio and video podcasts, lectures, and PDFs. And because iTunes U exists within iTunes, you already have a huge pre-existing audience that's available for you to connect to. So why use iTunes? It's growing really, really quickly, and it's becoming increasingly important. Right now, over 1,000 institutions are using iTunes. However, iTunes U is much less noisy than other platforms like YouTube. And what do I mean by that? I mean that on YouTube, pretty much anybody can sign up and make an account. On iTunes, it's not the case. To have an iTunes U account, there's actually an application process through Apple. And the reason they do this is to ensure that only legitimate educational organizations are putting content to the platform. And with more iPads being deployed, as you can see, 1.5 million are in use right now, iTunes U can be a really strong and useful tool for disseminating your content. And I'm not suggesting that iTunes U be a replacement platform for you to use. So if you already put your videos on your website or you put them on YouTube, you should definitely keep doing that. This is just one additional platform you can leverage. This is the availability of the iTunes Store worldwide, and this is where it was in 2011. And in June of this year, Apple actually added 32 more countries, increasing their worldwide access and therefore your content's worldwide access. This was our store. I call it a store because it's what Apple calls their what's in iTunes, but it's not really a store since everything's free. We launched about almost exactly a year ago, and the project actually started in our IT office. And then my Department of Education and Outreach took it over as it seemed more suitable as a digital outreach tool. Our development of iTunes took about a year, though like most projects, the bulk of the work didn't happen until the last 3 months. And our process was pretty extensive. We started with the discovery process where we benchmarked sites for best practices. And we just looked around to see what was out there and what we liked. We worked a little bit on site design and information architecture. So each person on our team, and our team was 3 members, one of which included myself, we all created a short list of best practice sites that we liked, and we reviewed and compared them. This was the PDF of all the sites that we put together. You see Cornell University here, their template style is very similar to what we ended up going with. From there, we did a gap analysis. This meant that we ran a study, and we did keyword searches against our topic strengths within our media, and then we compared that to iTunes. So we put together a spreadsheet like this, and what we did here is, say we had a video on leopards, we would run a search in iTunes, and we saw, there was only 3 results of leopards in iTunes. And what this told us is that if we put that video out there, and it was higher than the low quality ones that we found already on iTunes, we had a really good chance of standing out. So we weren't going to be competing against a lot of other noise. In comparison to Human Evolution, which had over 200 search results in iTunes, and they were medium to high quality content. So this really helped us decide where we would be successful and what avenues we should continue creating content for. So then we did a quality analysis, and we compared the production quality of our media to what was already on iTunes, and we asked ourselves this question of, are we game? Are we ready for this? Here are two screenshots from videos. One is from Harvard and the second is from a university in Germany. And we looked at these and we said, yes, the videos that we have created so far, they're similar in content, they're similar in style. I think it would work on this platform. And then we moved on to information architecture, which are pretty much fancy words for deciding how we wanted to organize and structure our content. And to decide this, we first had to see what we had. So we started assessing our media, first for topics, looked at their appropriateness for iTunes U, and then decided what collections we wanted and what we could create. Because Apple has this thing where they want a minimum of 3 pieces of content in a collection on their platform, which I'll talk more about later. And the IA was really tailored to who we decided we wanted our priority audiences to be. So we wanted to provide content for Gen Y and millennials, which meant that we needed to have shorter podcasts aimed at popular topics. We also wanted to have things for students and pre-professionals, which meant we needed to have scientific lectures. And for us, that meant that we actually had to go out and start filming scientific lectures at our museum. So we started taking a camera around to the research departments when they gave a talk, and we started recording these so we would be able to provide things for this audience that we wanted to reach. We also wanted museum professionals, and so we wanted to make sure that we had videos that included topics like museum studies. Here are some examples of the documents we put together during this development phase. They assessed really what our content holdings were and our first steps of trying to organize them into groupings. From then we moved from discovery to design. We want to talk about our main look and feel, and for iTunes that means you really have your main page to worry about. And so we just played around with a few different ideas and put one together. From design we moved to wireframes. So we wanted to create wireframes to show what our main content areas would be. And we really wanted to focus on 3. We wanted to have a featured section for new content. We wanted to have something for museum education and lectures, but we wanted the bulk of our organization to be by research departments. So within natural history, we have 7 research departments. We ended up grouping invertebrate and vertebrate zoology together because they just didn't have enough content on their own to be separate ones. But we told them if they created more videos, they could have their own. So we launched with 6 areas. These were our wireframes to illustrate that. You see what the research area is trying to be our big organizational feature. And then from there, we need to be really strategic about what we wanted to title our collections. So there's a limit to the number of characters that can be displayed, especially on the iPad and iPhone. So those lack mouse over support. So if I had dragged my mouse over Human Origins, the whole title would appear. You can't do that on your mobile device. So it's really important to get your important ideas across first. Next was descriptive text for every collection. To do that, we actually wrote up every collection description in a Word document and sent it around to the 2 other people on the team, and everybody provided edits and sent it back. So from there, we started pulling together and we had a site, and we showed it around for feedback, and we realized we were missing something really important, and we were missing something on our collection icons. And this was branding. It's really critical for you to brand your collection thumbnails because of how users get to your iTunes page. You might want to think that people are coming to your page like they come to your museum through the front door, but that's not what's happening. So people are not coming to your iTunes page by going to your iTunes page first and then filtering through your nice pretty layout. Actually, they're coming to you through a search. And search results is the #1 way that people find content on iTunes. So here I've searched for volcanoes up on the top right, and then I can filter it on the left and filter just iTunes U results. And this goes back to why iTunes is such a great platform, because regular iTunes results are also in here. So people searching just regular iTunes, if they search something like dinosaurs in regular iTunes, they're also going to get dinosaurs in iTunes U. So you're hitting this bigger audience. And so from here, you see that it pulls up this collection, Volcanoes with Liz. And while it might be hard to see the branding on a thumbnail this size, it's especially visible, for instance, when you pull it up like in cover flow format on your mobile device. So again, this is another reason why it's really important to think about the user experience, because while you might not see it here, they're going to see it other places with how they actually use your content. So this is what it would look like if I had clicked on that Volcanoes with Liz collection. It would pull up this page. You can see the branding again on the thumbnail. You see the list of media assets in the collections, and you can see how many words are visible. There's not many. This is why it's recommended again to left align all of your important information, because some people might be inclined to label a series like this, Volcanoes with Liz : plate tectonics, or Volcanoes with Liz : volcanoes under pressure, and so forth. Don't do that. If you do that, your users won't be able to easily see what your content would be specifically about. And also here you can add customer ratings, they can rate you a 1 to 5 star rating, and you can get feedback that way, or they can actually leave you a review comment. You also have a little bit of flexibility over here on this left rail where you can add your own list of URLs. So I added, learn more about Liz, and you can link back to our museum pages. So you can drive traffic back to your own museum site, which is a really important thing about iTunes. And the one other thing is these little CC labels. If you close caption your videos and upload them to iTunes, it'll automatically pick up that they've been closed captioned, and it'll display this symbol here. So your content can still be accessible. And so what we concluded through this design process and what we found out is that our information architecture and how we want to design our page was really restricted by how Apple structures their pages and their way of featuring featuring collections. Again, this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to have these 3 main bucket areas, what Apple calls feature boxes, with most of our media being organized by the research areas, but this didn't work. Through the best practices, we found out we needed to redo our entire IA. And we found this out about a month before we were going to launch, so it was a big deal. I did not sleep much. So we had to redo everything, and the major issue was, it was a bit of a nomenclature issue. So Apple likes to call these things collections, and collections to us, are a big group of objects. Collection to them are small. They're small groups of content, and they're very alike in topic, they're alike in format, and they're alike in duration. So you're gonna have, a 3-minute video podcast series on Etruscan pottery. And the reason they need to be that way is people subscribe to your collections. So if I see one video that I really like and I click subscribe, it downloads the rest of the content in that collection. If you add more content to that collection, they will also automatically download. So if I put up a 3-minute video, somebody subscribes, and then I give them an hour-long video, and then an audio podcast, and then a PDF, that's not what they're signing up for. That's not what they expect. So that's one reason you want to keep them small and keep them similar. And then Apple also has these thing called tag pages. And tag pages are where you can actually group collections together. So that's what we wanted to do with anthropology, have this big grouping. That would be a tag page, not a collection, which was a very hard thing for us to wrap our heads around when we got started. This would be the feed editor. So if I wanted a collection like anthropology, this is what the Apple backend looks like and gives me, this is what I'm allowed to edit. And you can see here, there's not a lot of things that are that you can change. So they have a lot of built-in boxes. One of which is these keywords down at the bottom. You can have 12 keywords. That's not many. It's also one of the reasons why you want to have specific collections, so you can utilize as many search terms as you can. And then if I clicked over on items, I would get this one, and this is the item level listing of individual pieces of media. So if this collection was a broad topic like anthropology, this would be a huge list of media, and they would be all different types. And so, and before I get back a little bit more to the IA limitations, there's a few important areas here to take note of, one of which is category. So under category, you see these really formal education and curriculum styled categories, and that's because iTunes launched for universities. And this is pre-designed taxonomy from Apple that helps them co-locate their content. And it's also meant to help institutions organize their content. So, it's a static organizational feature across all iTunes U pages. However, for us, this was a problem because almost the entirety of our content was going to fit under science. So we couldn't use it as a tool to organize. The other thing here to note is the advisory. You can leave this as it's optional to fill in, but you can also mark your content as clean or explicit. Now, if you do this, the important thing to note is if you mark something explicit, iPads being used in educational institutions actually have the ability to set their preferences to exclude explicit content. So if you do this by accident or you do this for whatever reason, just keep in mind that you could be prohibiting your content from getting to a large group of users. So back, we had to redo everything. Because again, collections should contain between 5 and 15 pieces of media. At a minimum, they should have 3. They should be small, they should be specific. You'd want to have a collection on Darwin, not a collection on evolution. You want a collection on a particular movement or an artist, not a collection on art history. And being specific also helps optimize your collection for possible promotion from Apple. Because when Apple highlights things on their main page, they highlight specific topics. And Apple really did highlight Darwin and went around and they looked at all the Darwin collections that were around, aggregated them all together and curated a collection and put them on their front page. And so again, you really need to focus also on the search feature of iTunes because the search feature is so important. You can only have those 12 search tags per collection. So the more collections you have, the more specific they are the more opportunities you're creating to show up in someone's search results. Here's an example of a collection that's too broad, much like what our anthropology collection would be. Right here you can see right off the bat that there's 5 pieces of media that start with sharing this particular type of language. Again, this is why you would not want to lead everything with the same title and then be more specific, because you can't tell right off the bat what's the difference between these videos. So these should be pulled out. They should be in a collection called, sharing this language, and then they should be specific under there. Because again, users want to know what they're getting into. So because we couldn't use the categories to design, categories to organize our content, and we couldn't use the collections to organize our content, because we still wanted to have things by department, we had to do these tag pages. And unfortunately for Apple, they put them in the bottom right hand of the page, and then you can't change them. But these are customized, so we made a search by department and a search by topic. And when you go in to create them, this is what you get. And you can pull the collections, and you can add as many as you want. And so when you tag a collection that you newly make, by tagging anthropology, it will automatically be pulled into here. Now, the great thing about tag pages is that they can have unique URLs, which means you can link to them from your website. So from our anthropology page on our website, we could link to our anthropology page within iTunes. And don't necessarily assume, again, that people are coming to your main page and you're just bearing this organizational feature at the bottom of the page, because again, that's not what is always happening. They're coming because of your link, or they're coming because of the search feature. So it's okay that they structure it this way. Here is an example of what the tag page looks like on ours. So this is one for a department for paleobiology. And then we also have topics. So we have a lot of content on evolution. So we wanted to make sure we have an evolution page that highlights that. So then from our development process, we had to go through a review. We had 2 committees at our museum. There was about 40 people that provided feedback. And then we got to the step of promotion. Now, we timed the launch of our site with Dinosaur Month that Apple was doing on iTunes. And it was also a topic in our gap analysis that we thought was thin on iTunes, so we thought we could stand out. And so while there's no guarantee that Apple will highlight your content, we did let them know the collection was coming up, and since it happened to match their plans to highlight dinosaurs in the month of October, they featured the launch of our store. And this was really huge, but regardless of what you do, you have to have a marketing plan. This is what it looked like when Apple highlighted us. We were up on their main banner page on iTunes U, and also this right rail, these automatically generate. So because they pushed users to our page, our collection became very popular and it was in the top downloads. And you see here that Ocean Lectures also popped up on the main page. We also did promotion of our own, so we put it on our homepage for our museum. And we also created a page on our museum website that talked about what iTunes U was, especially for some of the older scientists in our museum that didn't want to contribute content. We had to explain to them, why this was an important platform to use, where they could download the software, and how it works. So after 1 year, we had 273,000 plays. And plays we consider downloads plus previews. Previews being when somebody streams it directly in iTunes. And to give this number a little bit of context, our YouTube page had 123,000 plays during the same time. So iTunes U had more than double, which was really huge for us because we weren't really using digital platforms in a very big way before then. Now, what this actually looks like when you look at it on a graph is this. So what happens here is we started really strongly with Apple's promotion, and then we did nothing with the page. So things dropped off very quickly, and you can see here we didn't add any new content for almost 8 months. Don't do that. Have a plan. Be creating new content. Be having things that are going to come up. And you can let Apple know about it when you do, because maybe they'll promote you. You can see we had a few upticks when we did add something, but we didn't really just start adding content back until just recently. And since then, our plays have been going up again. This is another view of our content plays over 1 month, 6 months, and 12 months. Again, this light color here, it's all of the plays happened in the very beginning and then trickled off, except for one collection that's new as of last month. It's a lecture collection called 6 Minute Science, and all of its plays has come from this past 1 month. This just shows there's many different ways that you can get plays. For us, because iTunes U is really a place for downloads, the bulk of the plays come from people downloading your content. Then secondly, that they stream it in this thing called previews, and then there's something called enclosures. So when somebody actually subscribes to your site and it automatically downloads, that's called an enclosure. And these three things then brought together equal your entire plays. And from this, what it really shows is that 4 of our top 10 collections featured lectures. And this was really the main reason we wanted to get into using iTunes U. iTunes U, because it is more aimed at an academic audience, these are people that are downloading your content. They're going to spend more time watching your content. So if you're on YouTube, because it's streaming, you have a short attention span. iTunes U, Ocean Lectures was our most popular content, and Ocean Lectures, they're hour-long lectures. And so it really demonstrated that people were going to sit down and they were going to watch these longer styled, more scientific, more academic videos, because this was the platform that they were going to find these things. So I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how to get started. You can go to the iTunes U page on Apple. There is the application and approval process. However, I can't understate the value of museums using iTunes U for delivering educational media, especially with the rising popularity of smartphones and tablets. And for us at Natural History, adding iTunes U as a media dissemination platform pretty much almost tripled the reach of our media and educational content just within the past year. So it's been really tremendous for us. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie. We have a good small chunk of time here for some questions and answers, comments. And I'll suggest that maybe as we do that, our next group of speakers begin to reset.
Yes.
You mentioned that this inspired you to make new videos and lectures. Can you touch on the type of content you launched with YouTube? Is there anything besides videos?
So we launched with 180 media assets. About 12 of those were audio. The rest were videos. And I think the majority of those were shorter style podcasts. I think there was only, I think we launched with maybe 20 or 30 actual lectures, and those were the lectures that we had gone and filmed right before we launched.
Why did you include PDFs?
Because we didn't have any PDFs that were suitable.
One is that we have apps, and we have like a presence basically, an account. Will we, if we want to set up an iTunes U, is it under that same account or is it something different? And for us, it's really wonky because we have the Andy Warhol Museum, but we're part of an umbrella organization which is Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, and we share the same articles of incorporation. So in the store, our app is sold as Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, not the Andy Warhol Museum. And I'm just wondering, is that something when we create an iTunes, because Smithsonian's the same way, right? Like you guys are sort of separate organizations.
Yeah, so I guess the question was whether or not apps would be included under iTunes U.
Right.
The answer is no.
Okay.
So apps would have a separate site manager and login for that you would work with Apple with. If you wanted to merge the two together, Apple has this new thing called Courses that just launched this past year. We don't use it yet. However, as we do get into massively online, places for putting classroom-style content, it could be a place we use, but their Courses, it's only available, unfortunately, for iPads and iOS devices, but it allows you to actually curate content around a learning objective, so you could take, you could have like a lesson plan or something, and then you could take things from iTunes or iTunes U, pull it in, you could take apps, pull it in, you could take things from iBooks, authoring software, and create polls and quizzes and pull those in, and you can aggregate all those collections together under Courses. So if you wanted to mesh them together, you could do it that way, but everything's separate.
And I guess maybe tagging onto that, another question I had is we're starting a new series of content that will continually be published, but it's more entertainment based, based around a music artist that comes to the museum and will record video. Is that something, I guess a dual-fold question, would that be part of iTunes U? And you talked about, it's a good idea to keep collections to 5 to 15. But if this is an ever-growing sort of thing, is that bad? Or is it more like a podcast as opposed to...
I think if it's a series and they're coming out, every week, I think that would be a reason why you could go longer. Because if you style in that way, it's a week and this is episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, I think that would be a reason for you to go over 15. But besides that, if there were ways that you could call them out into smaller ones, like maybe something is just about one genre, one theme, then longer might be suitable.
Oh, and then, I'm sorry, I have one.
Let's see.
Yeah, sure.
So how do you treat iTunes U in your entire kind of platform delivery strategy? Is it your most important? Is it the many that you're using, or does it apply in that landscape?
So for us, when we launch something, if we created content specifically for the web, we would put it on our website first, because we do want to drive traffic to our web pages, but then it would go shortly after to iTunes, and then it would go to YouTube. If we created something that was not involved with a website, so if it wasn't involved with like a temporary exhibition or an exhibition, it would go to iTunes U first.
Is this managed on the back end with iTunes Connect, or is it something different? iTunes Connect manages apps. Is it the same tool or no?
No. So iTunes uses it's called an iTunes U public site manager, and it has its unique URL.
Okay.
And we do still have time for another question. If anybody?
Are folks using your content in their own courses? Is that what
They can, and that is one of the nice things about it, is that people can pull your content and use them on their own.
Can you see folks doing that?
The disadvantage is that there is no way to find out if they're using your content yet. So you might see that your download spiked for some reason and have no reason why. This is something that I did bring up with the Apple developer that I was talking to, and she said that she would put that in as one of the other things that would be nice to have, because it would be great to know if somebody from another institution really loved our content and was using it. Mm-hmm.
How much sort of contextual information do you think is necessary to really, like if people are coming in, we have these telephone conversations, and one of the questions for us was like, well, we'd like to have them we'd like to set up a podcast, but we don't really know what to say, because clearly it needs to be introduced before you might hear Lyndon Johnson on the phone. Like, needs to explain what's going on. But for iTunes U, do you think that if they're coming in at the individual item level, is it possible to somehow do that through text as opposed to actually like recording something at the beginning of the conversation?
You could. So, you could have in your collection description text, these are 5-minute conversations with X person on these topics, and then for each one be more specific. But I still think you should, because they're all in a collection together, they should be themed the same way. So if you have the same intro music and the same introduction, I would prefer that there would be same 5-second, 10-second intro that would be static across all of them.
So you would still add an intro?
I would.
Any other questions or comments? Great, we may as well move on ahead then. Thanks. Thanks, Katie. Our next speakers are Laura Barfield from Trident Technical College and Georgette Mayo from the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. And if we can move that mic down, we'll be in good shape.
Okay, our institutions partnered on an IMLS National Leadership Grant, the Low Country Foodways Project, which we completed this year. Collaboration was a key for our success in getting this grant and in completing it. In this presentation, I'll be talking about the grant writing process in general and what we learned from the overall grant project experience. Georgette's going to talk about the importance of regional foodways for collection development, preservation, and community building. One of the unique things about our project is that we applied for and received an IMLS grant on our first attempt. So we hope that you're going to learn something from our experience that's going to help you with your grant writing and project administration, and hopefully encourage you to pursue grants for your project ideas. Of course, the most important thing for any grant project to get funding is one great idea. Most importantly for grants, it has to be a documented need or a problem to be solved. For example, our problem to be solved or documented need was that there was no centralized low country foodways collection, either print or electronic, in existence. So the goal of our project was to enhance access and advance research into the roots of our region's foodways. One way to start thinking about your project is perhaps to go to the IMLS website and look at some of their past funded projects to get a sense of the type of projects that have received grant awards. Of course, you don't want to duplicate any of their ideas, but the wide variety of projects that you're going to find on their website might spark an original idea of your own. Get a team together and help brainstorm and pre-plan your grant. The team builds enthusiasm and it gives you support, and our pre-grant team consists of about 10 faculty and staff from our college. After you've come up with that great idea, the next thing you want to do is write a concept paper. A concept paper is a 1 to 2 page paper that gives a brief overview of your idea. In the concept paper, you want to include the significance of the project and why the project should be supported. The benefit of a concept paper is that you can use it to shop your idea around to potential funders. It's going to help you find out if your idea is actually fundable, and the concept paper is going to serve as the foundation for a full grant proposal. After your concept paper is completed, the next thing you want to do is shop your project idea around to potential funders. You want to target any local, regional, or national grant agencies that might fund your project, including IMLS. You want to go to each agency website and look for program officers. You want to send them an email with your concept paper attached and ask them if your concept is a good fit for their organization and whether you should apply. The program officers are going to tell you whether they will fund your type of project. If your idea is not a good fit, they may refer you to another agency or program, and if they don't, ask them for referrals. After you've gotten feedback based on your concept paper and you have chosen an organization to which you want to apply for their grant, before you write it, you want to consider some of these things. You want to identify potential partners, if partners are required. Potential partners include other museums, libraries, historical societies, academic institutions, community groups, et cetera, et cetera. So collaboration is a key component of IMLS grants and one of the reasons our grant was funded. Also consider whether your institution has cost share funds available if cost sharing is required. For our particular grant, we could cost share like time and stuff like that, but not all grants are like that. Determine who's going to administer the grant and who's going to handle the duties such as financial, human resources, payroll, budget, project report writing. And then finally, you want to start gathering letters of support for your project. And these letters can come from academic scholars or business, institutional, or community leaders, anyone who can quantify the need for your funding of your idea. After you've answered these questions, you're ready to write your grant. Determine if one person is going to write it or if you're going to make it a team effort. IMLS wants grant applications to reflect a scholarly, well-researched position. So if you're not a subject expert on your topic, become one. Do your research. On their grant review team, they're going to have at least one person that knows your subject in depth, so they're going to know if you know your stuff. In addition, IMLS grants are outcome-based grants, and you need to learn about the outcome-based grant model. I had no idea about this, so I took the online Shaping Outcomes course, and that helps a lot for you to understand outcomes-based planning and an evaluation model. Each grant should have 2 to 3 outcomes that will be completed at the end of the grant period. Another thing that's helpful is to print out some of the sample apps that they have on their website. When I was writing my grant, those are really essential because they sort of served as models for me, you know, because I could see how other people, their thought process and how well they did their research and that kind of stuff. So I think that's really helpful. And some good news, in fiscal year 2013, IMLS is going to simplify their grant application process a little bit, and it's going to be more user-friendly, so that's another incentive for you to apply. Approximately 6 months prior to the grant deadline, submit a draft of your grant to one of their program officers for feedback. This is essential because they will tell you if you're on the right track and what you need to do to tighten up your grant concept. That is another reason our grant was successful, because our program officer, Chuck Thomas, was really helpful and told me what I needed to do, and I did exactly what he said. So that was like a big bonus. Take advantage. They have conference calls, they have webinars, so they will give you some more grant advice and give you periods where you can ask questions and answers. Oops, I went way far away. And then, why is it doing? Sorry, y'all. Okay. Finally, some other things you want to know about is that when IMLS grant teams review your grant, the most important thing they look at is your assessment of needs section, which is usually the first section. And based on that section, they will decide whether to continue to read that grant or put it on the slush pile. So you want to make your case with the assessment of needs section. In addition, IMLS wants you to show in your grant that you're using technology in new ways to support your ideas. They want you to demonstrate how you're going to publicize and disseminate your results to the broadest audience possible using new web technology. After you submit your grant, and if you get funded, then read the feedback that the grant reviewers give you. Start and complete any pre-grant activities before the official grant start date, and get a final grant team together with your collaborators. You also want to start a publicity marketing campaign to let people in your community know that your grant has been funded, and this generates a lot of interest, and you will have people calling you and emailing you when they hear about it. Once the grant starts, you want to have everything in place to be ready to start the day the grant funding begins. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about our lessons learned. One of the things that we probably could have used was a seasoned grant professional on our team. We did not have one. So sometimes we felt like we were flying by the seat of our pants. Sometimes we were doing things trial by fire. But on the other hand, this turned out to be a good learning experience. And I think it's one of the inherent outcomes for the grant team on a planning grant, because we found out what works and what didn't work. Personnel management, hire the best people that you can to reach your outcomes. Try to hire people that don't already have full-time jobs or multiple part-time jobs, because usually the grant job becomes the weaker of all the things ahead. Another thing, if you have staff that works off-site, which we did, we had 5 people that I would call telecommuters, and 3 out of the 5, it worked out pretty good. But we had 2 that were doing research and traveling, and so one of them I had to let go because they weren't really staying on task. So after that happened, I kind of figured out a system where for all my telecommuters, I was getting more regular reports and feedback to make sure that they were doing what they said they were doing. Another thing is just pure old bureaucracy and paperwork. I work for a very large institution, and I had no idea that if you wanted to buy paper clips, that it would take like 100 emails, 50 forms, lots of resubmission, so that kind of thing. I don't know how you get around it, but it's just something that you got to know that's going to happen. And it put a lot of, say, stop gaps a lot of times, which drove me crazy, but that's okay. Then another thing to consider is if you're going to be the grant administrator on top of a full-time job, see if your boss will relieve you of some of your duties. Mine did not, but they were very understanding. But a lot of times, you're not working on your grant every day, but when you do have to work it, all of a sudden it's a lot of activities in a short time, in these little short chunks and little short chunks. Then you have your projects that are going on at work, so it's constant competition between grant projects, work projects. So I felt like my regular job sort of fell behind, while I was doing this. We also had an advisory board as part of our grant, and we had very limited funds to pay for travel expenses, so we used sort of like regional foodways experts. And our first meeting was really great. There's a lot of enthusiasm and all that, but as time wore on, their ideas trickled down and their enthusiasm trickled down. So in retrospect, it probably would have been better if we just would have had one major advisory board with national, I would say, experts. We probably would have got more bang for our buck doing that. Okay, overall though, the grant was a success, I think, because it was a great professional experience and we completed all our outcomes. We met lots of interesting people who are really enthusiastic about foodways. I mean, if you talk about food, everybody's like, oh wow, that's so cool. And so everyone has a story, a recipe, all kinds of things they want to tell you. But we also, got contact from cancer researchers who are trying to think that, original diets help prevent anti-inflammatory diseases, people from the slow food movement, a lot of community volunteers. It was an opportunity to learn some important lessons about grant management before tackling a bigger project. It gave us an opportunity to test out our ideas and to assess what type of team and logistics that we needed to move forward. So I encourage you to apply for IMLS grants because it was very rewarding, and IMLS was extremely professional group to work with, and my program officer was awesome. So now Georgette will talk about foodways.
Okay, greetings everyone. Okay, we'll go to,
okay, here you go.
Do the slide thing. Okay, the reasons why the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture, which is part of the College of Charleston, and is a manuscript archive, a small museum, and a cultural center for public programming, partnered with Trident Technical College, the fastest growing two-year college in the Charleston, South Carolina area, were multifold. With the Avery's mission to collect, preserve, and document the African American experience in Charleston and the Low Country region, the partnership on this planning grant, which was establishing the foundation for an actual grant on Low Country foodways, presented a wonderful collection gathering opportunity for our institution. From the onset, we realized we needed to focus on the regional area known as the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor. The corridor refers to the coastal region beginning in Wilmington, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, which includes South Carolina and Georgia. To make the planning grant workable and manageable, we focused on the state of South Carolina. If we considered the South Carolina plan feasible, we would duplicate our efforts in the remaining states in the corridor, tweaking where needed. We realized we needed a way to identify foodway resources and related materials in the South Carolina Low Country, in addition to identifying and providing a survey of existing resources and making these findings and research accessible to the public. Our plan would provide a survey of archival records relating to Low Country foodways in local repositories and state archives. To create and preserve first-person narratives via oral histories regarding the origins of Low Country foodways. The Avery Research Center had written within this planning grant as a holding repository for the retention of these oral histories and other documentation relating to this project. For the information found and created, holdings holds great importance for many, not solely for scholars of foodways, folk life, historians, etc., but for young people in this region who are unaware of their rich cultural history, and for the education of Kumyals and those from off, which are Gullah and Southern terms for new transplants like myself to the Low Country region. The cultural and historic importance. The Low Country region has the combined influence of the descendants of numerous continents and countries: Africa, South America, Europe, Asia, representing countless cultural groups: Irish, Scottish, English, German, French, Native American, Caribbean, West African, and Spanish peoples. For this planning grant, a large focus was on the continued preservation of the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor. We have much evidence of the linguistic and cultural influence of this dominant culture, but little in regards to foodways outside of cookbooks. The Gullah people are descendants of African ethnic groups who arrived in America as early as the late 17th century. Many were brought to South Carolina and Georgia Low Country plantations because of their expertise in cultivating rice in the native countries in West Africa, Ghana, and Guinea. The slave owners had to communicate with their slaves, so they made sure that the enslaved used European words. In the English colonies of North America, the enslaved used the English-based Gullah language to communicate with one another. The Low Country has similar topographical climate and terrain as West Africa as it relates to rice production, making it conducive to growing similar crops. The Low Country contains one of the most extensive systems of marsh and tidal flats in the United States. In the 21st century, the Gullah still live in rural communities in the coastal region and on the sea islands of those two states and beyond, retaining many elements of African language and culture. Traditional foods continue to endure. Low Country Foods highlights sustainable lifestyle with a way of life living off the land. Rice and rice-based meals are most important, and a meal is not considered complete if it does not include white rice. Red rice and beans and hopping john are popular and not solely for New Year's Eve. Seafood. Oh, let me go back. We have vegetables and fruits, African-based foods, okra, greens, sweet potatoes, peas, peanuts, tomatoes, red and fried green, watermelon, eaten raw or made into tea, shrimp and grits, which is featured in the middle, crabs in the spring and summer, and oysters in the fall and winter, among other types of fish, mullet, grouper, and exotics, including eel. And then fowl and other types of animals, chicken, squirrel, coon, otherwise known as raccoon, are popular in the deep rural communities. Our desire was to identify people, places of food production, farming, fishing communities, and methods involved, and to provide a source of oral histories, documentations, and collections. Lessons learned on our end. Laura submitted the planning grant to IMLS in January 2010 and was awarded in the late spring, and we began implementation in October of the same year. The final report was submitted to IMLS in early summer of this year, so we had close to 2 years on this planning grant. These are several of the general agreed observations during the life of this planning grant. 1, it would be best to select partners, potential board members, advisory board members, prior to submitting the grant to identify the level of commitment available from the onset. 2, select people who have a vested interest in the project and who are willing to take part from start to finish in the collective, working as a collective team member. If they have to leave the team, they should suggest a suitable person to take their place. Unfortunately, we had several wonderful advisory board members. What you'll find is that other people are also interested in them, along with them having their own projects, which is understandable. That's why they're good. That's why they're in high demand. We just had to be patient, which goes into our third lesson learned. Have patience and be flexible to a point when working with others to obtain information. Many times you will have to work on their timetable, not yours. But plan well in advance for your own deadlines. And then working with the community, befriend members of that community that you're planning on getting oral histories from. It is best to have a community liaison to facilitate and advocate for you, and the reason why you desire to obtain these oral histories to begin with. And Laura and I was also discussing it probably would have been best to have someone from the actual communities that we were going into to actually do the oral histories, not even facilitate them, but just to actually do them. Towards the end, we did part of the grant that we did in, I think it was in April. We had a public historian that is hired from Avery, and he's from off also. And there was a lot of terminology that he just didn't understand, and it would have been better for a local person to actually who speaks the lingo, who knows the people, who the people actually are able to trust. Trust is a very big point in regards to doing any kind of community oral history.
Yeah, it should start. Let's see. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. The following is a slideshow in regards to a collaboration that we did with the Southern Foodways Alliance, who organized an event at Bowen's Island, a 60-year-old seafood restaurant known for their oyster roasts in James Island, a neighboring community in Charleston. We were also fortunate enough to do oral histories with the owners, their parents who started the restaurant 60 years ago, the person that actually goes out and gets the oysters. One of them, his name is Goat, and he's been with them for several decades, along with another seafood institution, Backman Seafood. And I have to brag that it's very, I know it's very scenic, and I live only 5 minutes away from Owens Island, so we frequent there. They have, along with their oyster roast, they have wonderful fried seafood, shrimp, and fish.
We have brochures from the Avery here, and we also have some resources for people who are interested in grants too. Before y'all leave, please take one of those.
Okay, thank you. If there's any questions, we'll gladly entertain them.
Great. Thank you both. And once again, we have some time for questions or comments, and we can be resetting for the next one.
Oh, you have a microphone. Yes. Hi.
Is there a web component, or the oral history is going to be available on the web anywhere, or do you actually have to come to the archives?
Sorry. That's something that we're still working on. We do have a website.
Yeah, we do have
And
a
it's-
website, but it's sort of like just like a placeholder, you know, because the final project, I mean, our final goal is to have a huge portal that has oral histories, plus we want to have community uploaded videos, text, images, you know, like a memory bank type thing. So we're trying to combine scholarly and, you know, community things. Yeah, right.
But it's not built into the grant. Would you write another grant?
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah, so this was like planning to figure it out because, you know, we have 4 states. We have a lot of territory to try to figure out. And plus we have all, you know, millions of ideas about how this will, you know, plan into public schools, you know, and this and that. You know, you just go on and on and on with this. Like I said, the cancer researchers want to get on it. I mean, you know, all kinds of people want to get in on this kind of thing, you know, so.
Any other questions or comments? In which case,
Yes,
oh, yes, one more. Okay.
I'm curious, with the planning grant, were they kind of like, now you should apply for the implementation grant? Like,
That is when,
basically mandated to do?
well, yeah, I mean, basically what they say, when you write the grant, in your grant, when you're writing, you say, and this is a preliminary grant to be applied to whatever your, you know, the full grant, whatever that's going to be, you know, and you say these activities are meant to support a whatever kind of grant you're going to apply for the final grant. Yes, they expect you to use this as a basis to apply for a full big grant, yes.
Further questions, comments? Great, then let's thank you again. And we can move on to our third segment for the day with Mike Whitman from the Henry Ford and Kelsey Livingston from Cortina Productions.
Okay, great. We're going to be talking about that interactive that we've got installed in the exhibit hall. How many, show of hands, who's seen the touchscreen interactive down in the Cortina booth? So about half of you. Well, we've got a little movie in a minute to kind of share with you, those who have not seen it. We've got a movie that kind of shares that with you. So what are some of the questions we ask? I've been listening to the questions around the conference. When trying to develop interactives, I've heard things like, how do you create experiences that reach like multiple audiences and address different learning styles? How do you create experiences that are used, that really pay off in the investment? And how do you build a systems and experiences and technologies that all work together and then do that all within our means and budgets and capabilities? Where do we start? Well, how do we bring this whole thing together? What this is an attempt to do today is to show you what we did, but also I really believe that no matter how big or how small you are, we can all achieve these things. So we're going to try to give you some insights into how we did it and kind of open up the laboratory, if you will. So a little bit about some inspiration for me personally. I want to give you a little background on the Henry Ford. That is our name today. It wasn't the original name. The original name is the Edison Institute. Henry Ford did this incredible collecting effort, brought all the stuff of Americana by the trainloads, moved houses, moved laboratories. Thomas Edison's Menlo Laboratory, the Wright Brothers Bicycle Shop, moved all these things, 610 Allegheny steam engine, moved all this stuff here. And then he dedicated the whole thing. The name of is called the Edison Institute, and I just think that's really special. So we are a multi-venue destination, a 12-acre museum, 80 buildings, 80 acres. It's actually about 300 acres of developed land and 3 working farms and a railroad, a high school, 26 million artifacts, and about 1.5 million. This year we're going to have about 1.8 million people because we had Titanic this year. So that really helped boost us. This is real quick Mike's must-see list, just to give you an idea of just all. It's really hard to explain what we are if you look at that list of stuff. It's just about 300 years of American history and the Industrial Revolution, which starts in England. So all kinds of great stuff. So anyways, here's a little video to give you an idea of what we created on the floor.
In Driving America, the world's premier automobile exhibit at the Henry Ford in Dearborn, Michigan, 18 interactive kiosks invite visitors to discover the history of the automobile in America. Visitors enter the experience through a main menu of activities. In Explore Our Collections, visitors have access to over 4,000 objects from the collection of the Henry Ford. Visitors can explore historic artifacts, photographs, audio, and video.
Every challenge, whether it's the environment.
Visitors can view the objects by time, filter objects by type, or search for new objects using a keyword cloud. They can also enter their own search terms, search by topic, or search by date. In Expert Insights, visitors hear from subject matter experts on exhibit topics, while in Vehicle Viewer, visitors digitally climb into nearby vehicles and look around. Using RFID cards, visitors collect objects throughout their visit and email themselves a link to their digital collection. Information collected from visitors is sent to the museum's Customer Relationship Management tool. Visitors can also use their mobile phone to view collections and objects. Objects are fed live from the client's collection database to the kiosk via an application programming interface. As more objects are digitized, they automatically appear on the floor kiosks. Videos also stream live from the web, creating a dynamic, flexible system. The Extensive Collections Explorer is just the beginning. Visitors can also select from 12 interactive games. Visitors can help Henry Ford design a new car.
Excellent.
Test drive a Model T. Explore the evolution of transportation networks. Fill out a historic survey from the Ford Company. Be the contestant in a car safety game show.
Correct. The reinforced cage structure reduces damage to the vehicle.
Help a 1910 socialite find transportation to get to Nantucket.
Steamboats were not as fast as trains.
Listen to music about cars through time. Create a car commercial. Design a car to appeal to the luxury market. Learn how to talk like a trucker.
This here superstar's headed for double nickels, and we'll let that Cadillac doing it to it in the monster lane go catch himself a coupon.
Take a quiz to determine their car personality. And explore the history of auto power options.
The gas turbine engine uses the...
An integrated glossary allows visitors to pause the game to define a word at any time. At the end of each activity, visitors can explore related objects from the collection and see related events happening throughout the Henry Ford. The entire interactive system is driven by an extensive show control system accessible by password from any computer at the Henry Ford. Step.
Okay, the movie goes on to explain extensively this whole show control system. So the amazing thing is basically Kelsey and I all by ourselves did this entire thing in like 2 months. It was no. Kelsey's like, that's not in the script. What are you doing? There were so many people involved in this thing, so much good talent that came to the table to create this thing. But the thing is this is not the only thing we were actually working on. And I'm going to show you in a minute all the things that were going on. But a few slides that show you some of the incredible photography. And if you go out on the floor and play with the kiosk, you can really get a sense. People are blown away by the depth to which they can get inside the cars. And that was one of the paradigm shifts, is allowing people to virtually get inside the objects in ways that we're not going to let people get on this, over 100-year-old carriage. All right. So this was not the only thing that we were doing in the year of 2011. We were doing many things. We were doing this. We were trying to produce an 80,000 square foot complete redo of our flagship Driving America exhibit, brand new exhibit. We were implementing a brand new collection system, and we did it in 8 months, and the industry told us it would take 3 years. We didn't have 3 years. We had to have a system so we could put digitized artifacts in it and produce the kiosk to get onto mobile, and on and on and on it goes. There was no time to stop and wait for 3 years. We were also digitizing. When we started, there were 300 items actually available on the web. We had done digitized for the last 20 years, and there's digitized records, but I'm talking about web ready. There was 300. We had to go from 300 to 4,000 in about 4 months, and we did it. And today, there's about 12,000 artifacts or up to 20,000 images accessible on the floor, real time, just by touching. We also had to develop a web access capability that was kind of like in parallel with the experience on the floor. And as well, a mobile website. We set our goals really, really high on this. We thought doing all these things together would be a good thing. Oh, and we had to develop APIs. Oh, and we had to redo our whole technology infrastructure of servers and storage and everything on the floor to deliver this real time in a speedy way. Why the heck would someone want to converge all these things together? It actually was intentional, because if you think about it, when you're doing all these things together, just focus for a minute on APIs. And I know a lot of people out there, some have done APIs, some would like to do APIs. If your goal is to develop something to the end user and you're digitizing at the same time, it really opens up the discussion about what those APIs should be. It really stretches your thinking rather than just being a technological project. So this intentional convergence really stretched our thinking and helped us develop these ideas. Another key is that we had clear, agreed upon goals before we even started. So one architecture, delivering many expressions. This kiosk is just one expression. Web, mobile, those are two. There are many more, which you'll see in a little while. Real-time access. So here's our goals. One system that everybody's going to use for all objects. One API system to deliver to, and over time, all kinds of things. You saw in the video, multiple layers of interactivity and exploration, allowing people to play with the artifacts, do their own collecting, do their own curating. The real-time access thing. And it's intended that the collection is going to grow for the next many, many years. And literally, curators put in content, the registrars put content in the system, and it magically appears on the screens real time. We do about a weekly basis refresh. And then, of course, we had to build this technology infrastructure. It took incredible collaboration and project management. And our project plans had to be nimble because we're doing all the stuff at the same time. As we learned, as we were doing, as we were prototyping, we had to change. Not the original goals, but the little micro things along the way. So one of the keys was we used dedicated real project managers, not someone we yanked out of some business process and said, hey, you're a project manager today. You don't know how to do project management, never done it, but you're going to do it. No. We picked people who actually had real skills for project management. In fact, actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. So why do we need all this project management? Because we had to work through some tough questions. Questions like, what's the precedent? This thing we're trying to do, no one's quite doing this in the industry, this playing with artifacts kind of thing. That's an uncomfortable feeling. How do we work through that? What do you mean design the data model before the project's even done, before the user interface is even completed? How do you do that? Don't you design the web first and that will inform the data model? boy, there's just too many choices here. This is like fire hosing the guests with multiple layers of technology and interactions. And these are real questions asked. Isn't this really like for 10-year-old boys that are interested in technology? I mean, these were the questions we were dealing with. We had to find a way to get through all these. What do you mean visitors are going to curate their own experience? Aren't we the authority? So we had to deal with all these things. So these are the project managers. So multiple converging projects, each one with a dedicated project manager. Now we've got 2 in the room today. We've got Kelsey and we've got Ellis over there. Raise your hand, Ellis. And their names are up here. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey at this point. She's going to walk through what she did as a project manager, helping us build these kiosks through Cortina. She's from Cortina.
Hi, so I'm Kelsey Livingston. I'm a project manager with Cortina, and I think Mike's given the sort of overarching view, and what I'm going to be talking about is just this kiosk experience, which, as you can see, is part of a much larger sort of ecosystems of things that they were developing together. We did the kiosk experience over the course of about 18 months, and really the process of our team, the technical team, and Mike's technical team working together was really over the course of about 12 months. So everything I'm going to talk about is 12 months or so of development. So at the time that it went from the first 6 months was design, sort of figuring out what we were going to do. At the time it sort of got turned over to our production team at Cortina Productions, we did know a bunch of things about what we wanted these kiosks to do. And so we had sort of 5 experience goals for the visitor. The first was that it would have a lot of different entry points for different ages of visitors, and have different types of experiences that would appeal to car enthusiasts, to kids, to all different kinds of visitors. So this wasn't intended for just one audience. The second was that the objects were the center and the star of the show, and that the interactions with the objects would be playful and fun and would be directed by the visitor. So the visitor could do all the searching, all the different features you saw. The idea was to make the objects easy to explore and fun to play with. The third was that you saw that list of sort of all the different more game-like applications we created. The Henry Ford had identified 12 specific artifacts or objects, things that they wanted to really create an in-depth experience around, so we developed for them 12 activities like this is for their Model T, and we actually had this activity available right next to the same car, so you could jump in.
You gotta go play this one on the floor. It's a lot of fun.
It's available downstairs. You can crash into the cows.
Or not.
It's good. So that was so take the most iconic and interesting artifacts and create whole experiences around them. The fourth was, and Mike alluded to this a little bit, but to have a back-end show control experience where their staff, both the technical and non-technical staff, could customize the kiosk. So there were 18 kiosks on the floor, and the idea was to, if this kiosk was in the safety section of Driving America, to curate objects and interviews with their curators and vehicles that were related to that. So when you first went into the Collections Explorer, you were greeted by things that were relevant to the topics you were around, and activities, the different games that were relevant to the area where you were. So create a system that really allowed that to happen. And then finally integrate with this larger ecosystem. So we added QR codes and the ability to do to connect with the mobile site there. And then we had an RFID component to the experience. And the purpose of the RFID component, which is this card right here, is an RFID card that was given that's given to guests. And guests can take that and log in, and then they can go around to kiosks. And as they go to different kiosks, what they've done on kiosk number 1 is still available there on kiosk number 4, and it allows them to be tracked sort of along the floor.
So if I could interject for just a second. So just in the RFID card application itself, there was, even in that, multiple layers of technology. So we're talking about persistent reading of RFID cards. So as long as they're on the table, you're in the system. When you walk away with your card, you're logged out. That just solved the problem of having to log into the system and have a session and logging out. Then there was the interface with the e-marketing system. So when you put your email address, now the CRM system knows who you are, so it can send you your collection set in virtual space. So there's all these little micro things that we had to figure out, and we had to do, and no one had ever done quite this thing before with these sets of tools. So we had to figure it out and prototype, and we had this great nimble team, and over a period of a couple months, we figured all this out, and you know what? We allowed ourselves to fail. We would take, maybe someone would say, you know what, give me 2 days on this, and I'm going to prototype, and then we'd come back, and Kelsey's going to share in a minute how we managed that process, but it was really this flowing ecosystem of prototyping and collaboration that was really cool.
So those were the goals that we had for the visitor experience at the kiosk, and I'd really divide the next 12 months into two stages, a prototyping stages and an implementation stage. So we went into the prototyping stage, and I think there were one of the big keys that made it successful was a standing weekly meeting. And I'd recommend this for any projects that involve a lot of technology between the Henry Ford technology staff, a lot of those project managers that were listed, the API vendor. So for those of you, an API is an application programming interface, and basically I like to think of it as a list of things you can do with the objects. So the Henry Ford has defined that outside vendors can search the objects, they can get objects back, they can display pictures of objects, a list of sort of verbs of what you could do with the objects, and then any vendor, their mobile vendor, could then get objects and search objects, the kiosk can get objects and search objects, and those different folks don't need to know exactly the functionality behind that, they just know I can search groups of objects.
So literally the vendors can play with the collection themselves to create really cool applications. We don't even know what those applications are in the future, but when I tell a developer, oh, we've got this set of APIs that gives you full access to the collection, they're like, oh my gosh, you mean like treasure hunts, virtual reality? Yeah, do whatever you want. So it gives us an opportunity for new partnerships all over the place.
So those were being developed concurrently with the kiosk. That list of verbs wasn't yet completely solidified, and the people who were developing that was an outside vendor called Openfield. So Cortina Productions, Openfield, and the Henry Ford were on the phone weekly, and the goal of those first 6 months was to sort of surface the questions of what were we not sure how we were going to do yet, and then to try to attack them and prototype them. So we had the meetings not so much to just discuss how we were going to go through things, but identify a question, identify who was going to create a prototype around that question for the following week, who was going to try to figure it out, and then hold each other accountable on those deadlines to start just knocking through those questions. So here's just a couple of the questions that we tackled. How do we handle searches that return thousands of results on a kiosk where maybe the goal isn't, a really in-depth experience of looking at 10,000 pictures of cars? How often should the floor kiosk check for new data? Do they need to get it, minute by minute? Do they need to get it hour by week? How, they had an existing video platform for streaming called Uyala. How are the captions formatted in that, and how do we bring that in? Tons of questions that we weren't sure at the top how we were going to deal with, but we would raise them and then try to create little coded prototypes, nothing you would necessarily show to your executive board, but just, can we do this? Can our developers access this information?
And I just want to say one thing real quick. What was really fun in the middle of this, and actually we took the prototype right to the boardroom. I had this opportunity to present this along with one of my colleagues there, and we actually had, and there's some of the Ford family members are on our board, we actually got them to come up out of their board seat and actually come up to the prototype kiosk and engage with the technology. And I tell you, that really, it informed, it gave us feedback, they were playfully engaged in the thing, and it helped with the acceptance of the thing. So we had fun with it.
Yeah, it was good. So we did that for 3 or 4 months, basically, of just knocking through these problems. And while we were doing that concurrently, our design staff at Cortina Production were doing visual prototypes. So we were doing these code prototypes to answer technical questions, and then we were doing visual prototypes, and that was going through our wireframe and design process. So we started with, this was some of our very first wireframes, and at Cortina Productions we usually focus our wireframes on functionality and sort of screen layout first, and then apply the design and the visuals to that once we sort of nail that down. So we went through some early comps. At each stage we shared it with the Henry Ford, and then we iterated. So we did these wireframes. We started working on the bottom navigation. There were all these different elements, a collection explorer, different games. How is that going to work to create a system where you could have different activities available at different kiosks? We took a first stab at the actual exploring of the collections interface, and this is the first interface that we came up with. One of the things that's really important to us at Cortina is to have interfaces that are very intuitive, that require no written explanation. You find that people don't usually read your written explanation, so it needs to be clear enough that everyone knows how to use it, and that doesn't always happen right away. So we made this, and then we actually print it out, and we take it around to coworkers at the office who aren't working on the project, to friends and family, to our target audience in more formal sessions, and we have people touch the paper and show what they would do, and a lot of times it's not necessarily what we would think that they would do, and we iterate on that point. So this is one prototype, and even before we started implementing and programming, it changed substantially just in terms of layout and sort of what we were doing. So we had the 2 tracks. We had the coding prototypes going for about 4 months, and we had the wireframes and design going. And then about 4 months in, we started actually programming a real prototype, bringing those 2 things together. And this was sort of our first prototype. You can see there's like white bars on the pictures. Things aren't laid out exactly correctly. But the benefit of doing this quickly and roughly, so 6 months in, halfway through our process, was to be able to bring it then to the executive team, to the other people who we wanted to secure buy-in, who Mike had been talking about this idea with for 3 years, but they hadn't actually seen it, and to say, look, you can manipulate the objects. Look, this is how this is going to work. And so about halfway through the process, we had this great presentation.
And I tell you, that I will never forget this day. You saw those questions from earlier where people were saying, what is the precedence? How's this going to work? I don't understand it. It's confusing. I will never forget the day that Cortina brought this. It was a wooden frame with the touch screen in it, and a couple of our staff who were struggling with these ideas, one of them came up to the kiosk and they were just kind of looking at it, and then he touched. And then he touched, and he touched, and he touched. And within about 30 seconds, he completely took this thing over. And what was he doing? He was curating right there with the prototype. And I was in the back of the room going, yes, we've finally gone over a huge hump. We're not deliberating, can this work anymore? The prototype validated the whole thing. And that was a great day. And I'm glad you guys did that.
Yeah, it was good. It was a team effort. So we did that for 6 months, and then you'll notice that we didn't do a lot of long documents up to this point. I haven't talked about pages and pages of specifications because it was important to work through the questions first and find out what avenues were open to us and how we're going to do the integration. And then we moved to sort of the technical integration, the second half of we have gone from exploration to decision mode. We need to start making decisions about how we're going to do this. Not that we can't back out of them, but we can't sort of be exploring forever if we're going to make an opening that's going to coincide with this Driving America exhibit. So at this point, the Henry Ford staff, and Mike in particular, put together this API documentation where it says these are our verbs, this is what we're going to be able to do. We put together documentation for the interactions on our kiosk and that sort of thing, and we passed it around amongst the team to say, we've worked through all these questions. Is this how we want to do this? Yes, this is how we want to actually move forward.
And I think your earlier point about accountability, this was so important through this weekly process, because on this one, did I really want to go home and write a 70-page API documentation document in 3 days? Well, it was my first choice, but the project needed to do it, and all of us had to do tasks like that. We all had to be kind of accountable and work together, because if one person didn't do their thing, we couldn't move this whole thing forward. So that's what we did.
And I would say it's probably, this is obviously a huge project. It's not necessary to do this level of documentation for smaller things, so it's not to be intimidated by
I didn't mean to scare you with the 70 pages.
What we had
you could
to do
write an
here.
API documentation set in 10 pages.
Right. One, depending on how big your API was. But we started making decisions here is the key point. And we had to work through I just have a couple of specific examples. There was a data structure set out, like Mike had talked about, in the collections database, but the curators had realized that they wanted to include all these different information about the vehicles that really wasn't incorporated into that.
Yeah, so just think of it for a second. A house, a steam engine, and a car. Their attributes are completely different when you look at it from that perspective. But you're trying to create a standard of metadata in the whole thing in standard fields. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We came up with this idea, let's have one free-flowing field that basically is chunked XML metadata that's factual, and literally through their software or anybody else writing applications, literally grabs the XML data and recasts it right on the screen as facts. So what the user sees is not XML data, they see simple labels with colons and information. So that's how we tackled that.
So basically with the XML, we established a structure of, field definition that could be used by anything and that would be formatted really nicely. We could do some basic, HTML formatting in there as well if we needed to account for, all the different languages that things were in. And so it was just a very flexible way to do things. We needed to figure out, and this was really an API thing, but we needed to figure out what of all those fields we were going to search that was going to be a successful visitor experience to come up with things that the visitors might actually want to see.
And think about it, even the concept of searching itself, some of the feedback was, well, that's what you do at home or in the library or the research center. Why would users want to get at things through a search engine on the floor? Another paradigm we had to deal with. So we had to come up with a simple way through the prototype to show. And people are able to now, so whether you're a presenter, a member, a visitor, a curator, you literally can walk up to a kiosk, and if you're trying to make a point or show something, you can type in Edison, hit the thing. What comes back to the screen are all these records that you can start clicking on. So you're kind of telling the story on the floor.
And then one of the third things we had to do was just deal with all the dates that we had. There's 6 different date fields, I think, is that right,
Yes.
for objects? And so, you know, the subject date, the object date, and how were we going to organize those in a timeline? So we had to sort of prototype that and make decisions about that. And then the final thing I'd say, so the things that made this successful were weekly standing meetings, prototyping, visitor testing. When we started to have this prototype 6 months in, we had evening and weekend focus groups at Cortina Productions, and we had these standing. We brought in people of different ages and watched how they interacted, again, to make sure that our interfaces were intuitive, easy to use, and we basically did that prototype in enough time that we could make the changes that we would need to have this be a successful system.
In the pictures I saw, you guys had fun with that too.
Yeah, it was great. And then the final thing, sort of tagging onto that, is that instead of coming 3 days before opening to install this whole massive thing, we actually had a milestone for ourselves of 2.5 months before opening to install a working early on-site beta that the staff could interact with, that they could use the show control system,
This
and that
is
we could
huge.
work out all of the kinks in. And it, you know, it was a little bit of a change in mentality of it's going to break and it's not going to be done. And, you know, to train staff in how do you report it when it breaks, you know, who do you talk to, what's the process to figure that out, so we could work out the kinks before the visitors actually were using it in great numbers.
So we even had people lining up. We sometimes had to schedule time with the prototype because so many people were engaged in this and wanting to work with it. So here's that prototype word again. So I'm just going to take a couple more minutes to finish up so that we have time for questions, because I know we have like fire hosed you with information today. But at the bottom there you can see these are all the different technologies that we were having to work through in prototype. And we can answer questions on any one of those if you want to take a quick note. Let me talk real quickly about the structure, and we'll end it there. Simple web API, simple web delivery through APIs, and ours just stand on their own. You literally can execute the APIs through a single URL statement on a common browser. You can get at our collections by executing no code at all. You literally can access the collections through URLs. This is the kind of the data model that we started with 3 years ago. The idea is one system, one web service, and an infinite amount of applications on the bottom, rather than building an application where the data and the access is sitting inside the kiosk or the website or the microsite. You get that? So it's a web service that's open this wide, and the ability to develop multiple applications. In fact, here's all the applications today that are working off of this single API set in this data model. We've got the kiosks. We can embed things into newsletters. We can embed things into screens on the website. Those are actual virtual objects that you see on the left. We have an intranet access to our collections. We have a website that accesses the collections through the APIs, a mobile site, and mobile navigation. So lots of different ways to do that. Keep your APIs simple. This is it in a nutshell. It's 70 pages, but it all breaks down to that. Get, put, that's it. So, questions on any or all, whatever you want to talk about.
So you mentioned that you were tracking and identifying your customers using the RFID card. So were you tapping into a pre-existing CRM?
So we're doing a couple things. First of all, by using the card, we just established an identity with you. You can walk anywhere in the museum now, and simply by putting the card on the table, we know who you are. And we know what you're collecting, and you know, who knows in the future what we're going to do with that. Maybe it's more intuitive back, and maybe the technology says, oh, it looks like you really like trains here. You know, we got a village and a working steam engine and we laid the architecture down for those possibilities, but we had to, you know, stop at getting this thing done. But we did one more thing. Every touch on the screen, every touch is tracked with Google Analytics. So we can literally, now it's anonymous at that point, but let's say you go down for a 3-minute session. We know exactly where you navigated and what you did. And it's all in Google, and we put it in the 5-level hierarchy in Google, so it's fully accessible.
So you're not then tracking back that individual data into a constituent record?
Right.
Not today, but tomorrow we could say, you know what, with the persistent RFID reading and we've got the identity, now I could take that identity and put it in the Google Analytics and literally have the whole thing. By the way, we had no idea this was going to happen, but in about 5 months after we launched, 18 kiosks on the floor generated 1 million hits on our collections access database. Just 18 kiosks on the floor. It represented about 13% of our 12 million hits on the website for an entire year period of the same. We were blown away by that. So,
Do you consider using barcode instead of QR codes?
well, that's a funny thing. So we can use any code. So we decided to use QR codes, and most smartphones today have it's funny, when we have members night, we had 750 people in the museum, mostly senior citizens. They were almost knocking us over. Hey, I've got a smartphone. Again, blowing our paradigm. Many of them showed up with smartphones. I want a barcode reader. I've never done this before. And so what's happening is when you touch an object and open it up, learn more, it generates an on-demand QR code. Tomorrow, 3 years from now, we could go, you know what, that technology is not here anymore. We'll just turn it off or substitute it with something else. But we felt that QR codes, because phones are the ones reading them, they can read both, that code, we didn't have to do the aiming and that kind of thing, so that's why we went with QR codes. So all it does is when you touch an object, it knows what's on the screen. The software knows this is the Allegheny train engine. It renders a URL and puts it in the QR code on demand. So the QR codes aren't stored in the database, they're rendered on demand on the screen every time you bring up an object to the screen.
And then what happens when you scan it is you get the Allegheny train on your on your phone. So you can walk away with the information that was also available on the screen on your phone.
And it's amazing, even though this sounds like, wow, this is great, we're still dealing with the paradigm. Well, that's a marketing thing, and that's, I get emails. It's like, no, it's just connecting people with mobile phones to our website. It's not that deep. To do it on this scale, if you added up everything, I used the opportunity of deploying this technology to literally redo the infrastructure for the enterprise, not only on the floor, but the whole enterprise. So there's a lot of big things. I think street value, any particular interactive game, we did 12 modules. The price tag on the street would be anywhere from probably $20,000 to $50,000 per, depending on the complexity. The hardware, we're talking only less than $5,000 for each one of these kiosks in the hardware, just the hardware. The screen, it's a gaming PC and a metal enclosure. When you're doing multiple, you can push the cost to the fabricator across that. And then there's the network and all of that. So that'll give you some rough parameters.
One more quick question. It's a lot of technology all at once. What's the projected life cycle of this before you need to refresh everything? How did that play into?
That's a really good question.
Because there was another session that I went to. There's a museum about ready to flip the switch on this huge new interactive thing, and they projected it'll last for about 2 years. It's obviously this multi-million-dollar, instance of tech, and not all museums can do that. So I'm just curious what it is for you and how you developed.
Well, basically, we thought of that approach even before we began. So the way we organize the information in the system, the ability to provide access through mobile, through web, through kiosks, all that stuff and the content itself will stand the test of time. The platform is a Microsoft platform in .NET technology with SQL. It's done in very standard technology. So literally, it was intended that this ecosystem of software and show control could adapt over time and change and be flipped. It's all modular. So we could add new games. We could say, you know what, the Talk Like a Trucker stayed. It looks like then technology. We flip it and create a new module, and the software control system allows us to flip it over time. But one day, you know, who knows when the touchscreen experience will be stayed, and then your investment of $5,000 per, that's lost, but not the equity in the system in all the data.
I think the benefit of doing the API model and all that is obviously you could create new experiences, so you don't lose your data, you don't lose the access. But
Right.
the floor experience, yeah, I mean, we have stuff that's still running, 10, 12 years out, but not longer than that, and I think probably 5 to 8.
Our JFK kiosk, which was the early 12-year-ago prototype of this concept, is still running today. People are still going up and touching it. Yeah. But it is a great question.
Yeah, and excellent presentations all around. One more round of applause for all our users.